If you've been rolling with Jalen Hurts or Baker Mayfield, then you're looking for another quarterback option this week. Or do you have a quarterback that you've been trying to roll with that you're just fed up with? What quarterbacks are still out there? Who are going to be the best starts this week? Are there a couple of fringe guys that we can maybe stream? We've got all of it right now. And if you've been missing Lamar Jackson, you're all set this week, because yesterday he said he's 100%, he's ready to go. And on Thursday Night Football, going up against Miami, that allows the 9th most fantasy points per game, I'm sure we're going to get a really solid performance from him. Does he run nearly as much as he used to? Maybe not. Maybe it's a week or two before we see that type of upside, but I still think Lamar Jackson has a fabulous game this week, and if you've been waiting on him, you're clearly starting him. Baltimore is allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. It's still really hard to trust Tua this week, even after how good he was. Last week was only his 2nd top 12 performance of the season, and I totally get that he threw for 4 touchdowns and no interceptions. But in the 2 games prior to that, he threw for a total of 6 interceptions. Baltimore is obviously an easy matchup. Tua is definitely one of those guys that if you're willing to take the risk, he could be that streaming option this week that you need. Caleb Williams should have an awesome matchup going up against Cincinnati, who's currently allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. But what in the world was that performance against a Baltimore defense that hasn't been able to stop quarterbacks all season? He threw the ball 38 times, he did have 285 yards, but he had no touchdowns and an interception last week. In the last 4 games, he has 2 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, and he's thrown for 250 or more yards in 2 of the last 3 games. So that's not really that big of an issue, but this guy cannot find the end zone right now, and unfortunately, he's been turning the ball over way too much. His inconsistencies need to get leveled out. Joe Flacco has a shoulder injury that he is nursing right now, and there still is a chance that he could end up playing this week as of this recording. If for some reason that changes, then I will pin a comment when the video and the information comes out to let you all know. If Flacco plays, he's a start for me this week, especially in this matchup against Chicago, allowing the 10th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. If for some reason Flacco can't go and it ends up being Jake Browning instead, he's only a fringe start because I don't trust him nearly as much as I trust Flacco, but it is a good matchup. It was announced that J.J. McCarthy will be starting for the Minnesota Vikings going up against Detroit now that Carson Wentz is done for the year with a shoulder injury. And we haven't seen a ton from J.J. McCarthy yet this season. Really, it's been one half of really, really good football and a lot of other quarters of up and down performances. It's not all his fault. I'm not going to place the blame on just J.J. McCarthy. But hopefully the offensive line can do a little bit better now. Hopefully having Jordan Addison as part of the group definitely helps out J.J. McCarthy. And going up against a banged up secondary in Detroit could definitely help out as well. He's also back in the state of Michigan where he won a national championship. So we'll see how J.J. McCarthy does this week moving forward. I'm not interested in starting him his first week back. This Detroit Lions pass rush could still get after J.J. McCarthy and make it a tough day. And that's kind of what we saw from J.J. the last time out. Minnesota's line was unable to stop the pass rush, and J.J. McCarthy had an awful time getting outside of the pocket and trying to make things happen. Jared Goff at home, always better. That's the reason he's a start and not a fringe start this week. And he's fared well against the Minnesota Vikings. He does a good job against this Brian Flores defense. Does he have a huge upside against them? No, because they are a tough defense, but he's one of the better quarterbacks in the league at facing the blitz. And we know that Flores loves to send the blitz. His last 2 games going up against Minnesota, he's thrown for 511 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. I still would assume that Bryce Young will be back this week for the Carolina Panthers, but I don't care if it's him or Andy Dalton. Going up against the Green Bay Packers, I feel like we can find better options out there than either of these guys if you're looking to stream somebody. This matchup is way too difficult for how these guys have been playing. Jordan Love continues to have a really solid floor. He's only thrown 2 interceptions on the season. Last week is the QB1. It was only his 2nd top 12 performance of the year, but that's okay. Going up against Carolina this week, even if he doesn't have a top 12 ceiling once again, he's still going to be very, very close with just the floor. Justin Herbert finding some of that upside again here recently. He's been the quarterback 2 and the quarterback 3 the last couple of weeks. Now, he has thrown 3 interceptions over the last couple of games. Would love to see him clean that up, but he's got at least 1 passing touchdown in every game this season. And now against the Tennessee defense, where they could definitely put up some points early and then run the football the rest of the way. I don't know if he's a top 5 quarterback this week, but top 12 is definitely in play. Cam Ward continues to struggle with inconsistencies. This offense continues to struggle finding the end zone, and they're facing a defense allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Cam Ward, unfortunately, is not the answer this week. I've really got like one major question that I need answered in this Atlanta and New England matchup, and it's who the F are the Atlanta Falcons? Because they are Jekyll and they are Hyde. They go out and they just dismantle the Buffalo Bills at home and look like one of the most dominant teams in all of football. And then you get performances like last week where you can't even keep up with Miami. It feels like Michael Penix is going to be back this week. I'm going to leave him as questionable as of right now. But given the fact that he's coming back from an injury and going up against this New England defense, I would list him as a fringe start. New England allows the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Michael Penix Jr. to me is a guy that if you have an option with more upside this week that's been healthy, I would go that route first. And again, I don't know who the Atlanta Falcons actually are. Yes, they currently allow the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. They've been a little bit beat up on defense as of recent, but you see a guy like Tua just go off against them last week, and you gotta think to yourself, Drake May can do that. Now, maybe Drake May isn't going to throw for 4 touchdowns this week. It is a little bit of a tougher matchup. I get that. But Drake May has been an MVP candidate all season long. And I think he's one of the better quarterbacks that we can just say, hey, he's a set and forget guy. He really is up there with guys like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. Maybe not nearly as much upside as those guys sometimes, but I think he needs the same treatment. If you own Drake May, he's going to be in your lineup every week. Still no word on if Brock Purdy will be able to start this week. If it ends up being Mac Jones again, Mac Jones is a fringe start. Yes, it's a solid matchup against the New York Giants, and there is some potential for upside, but it's Mac Jones. And for me personally, he's a guy that I can't really list as a must start. Now, if Mac Jones is still available in your league and Brock Purdy obviously doesn't play, you could run out and get him and you could play him over a guy like Michael Penix or JJ McCarthy. You could play him over some guys that you just don't feel nearly as comfortable about. If Brock Purdy ends up playing, Brock Purdy will end up being a start, not just a fringe start. Jackson Dart has 12 total touchdowns in 5 games since becoming the starter. He's got a high ceiling every single week and a pretty solid floor. And after that performance going up against the Denver Broncos a couple of weeks ago, Jackson Dart is a guy that if you spin a pick on him and held on to him, or if you grabbed him off waivers, he has been a guy that not only has helped out so far, but likely helps you out tremendously the rest of the season. And the best part is, he's only thrown 3 interceptions so far this year. He is still taking care of the football while offering dynamic playmaking ability. Daniel Jones gets a really solid matchup this week going up against Pittsburgh, who's allowing the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. For me, when I take a look at Daniel Jones, he's got 3 straight games with 2 or more touchdowns, only 3 interceptions on the year, and he's been a top 12 quarterback in 6 of 8 games. Daniel Jones is obviously a start. Pittsburgh could see some negative game script this week. Indianapolis has done a good job of scoring and scoring often so far this season. And because of that, teams are typically playing from behind. Because of negative game script, Aaron Rodgers probably gives you the floor of a solid quarterback 2. But I do not think his ceiling rises to quarterback 1 territory this week. On paper, this matchup looks really tough for Bo Nix because Houston is currently allowing the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. He has had back-to-back top 5 weeks though, so he's clearly on the rise. He's a start because of how well he's playing, but those last couple of performances have come against teams with an easier defense. But when you take a look at the quarterbacks Houston has faced recently, how does that make you feel about the fantasy points per game that are being allowed? Because recently they faced Mac Jones, Sam Darnold, who's played well this year, but he didn't have a high ceiling against them, Cooper Rush, clearly not that big of a deal. Cam Ward hasn't really played well and offered a lot of fantasy points all season. And Trevor Lawrence, who's been up and down. So the quarterbacks they have faced recently are not all-world quarterbacks. So those numbers could be a little bit lower because of that, and Bo Nix could end up being just fine. Over the last 4 weeks, CJ Stroud has been the QB 15 2 times, but he's also been inside the top 12 the other 2 times. He's hit a little bit more of a higher ceiling as of recent, and even though Denver allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, no Patrick Surtain is a big win for them this week. Nico Collins should also be back. CJ Stroud, I'm going to put him as a fringe start because I still think quarterback 15 is a lot closer to what he will be for a majority of the year than a top 10 option. Trevor Lawrence has definitely been playing better as of late. Over his last 4 games, he's only thrown 1 interception after having 4 interceptions in the first 3 games to start the year. And this is a solid matchup going up against Las Vegas, but he hasn't really hit his ceiling all season long. He's been the quarterback 12 and quarterback 5 in 2 different games this year, and the quarterback 5 performance was really based on 2 rushing touchdowns, and it wasn't really the passing because he had 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Outside of that, he's been QB 23, QB 28 twice, he's been the QB 13, the QB 14, so his floor has been a little bit better, but I don't necessarily think his ceiling is all that better. Going up against Las Vegas, I'm willing to bet on the floor once again, but not the ceiling. I don't know. It's a solid matchup for Geno Smith. Jacksonville's allowing the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Do you really want to risk it though? Like honestly, I want you in the comments down below to tell me if your quarterback situation is at the point that you're willing to pick up and play Geno Smith in a solid matchup this week. Because if you are, while there is a little bit of upside for it, the ceiling, it could get shaky at times because Geno Smith still has 6 interceptions in his last 3 games. And then not only that, in their last matchup against Kansas City, he was replaced by Kenny Pickett towards the end of the game. Does it happen again? Are they really locked in with Geno Smith? Yes, I know they added Tyler Lockett, but he's just not a guy that I feel like realistically we need to risk it with right now. For New Orleans, it's a tough matchup, number 1. LA, they're going to get after the quarterback. They allow the 9th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. And Tyler Shuck has been listed and announced as the starter already. I still listed Spencer Rattler in here though because I'm not entirely sure that Shuck plays the entire game, to be honest with you. He came in last week and he wasn't really all that good, and I don't think Rattler really did anything to lose his job at this point. While I believe that some people may feel that way, Rattler hasn't been all that bad. The last game, yeah, obviously he wasn't any good, but 1 bad game and we're just going to give it to Shuck all of a sudden? If Shuck comes out and he plays terribly, who says that they don't go back to Spencer Rattler? There's just a lot of unknowns with this, and it being a tough matchup, I wouldn't consider Shuck this week. And if Spencer Rattler is really done for the season as the starter and is going to be moving to the backup, he can probably get those golf clubs out and start getting them shined up and ready for golf season. And the best people to help you get your clubs ready are going to be the people over at Caddy Splash. And since I've started carrying Caddy Splash products in my bag, at least I know my clubs will look good even when my golf game doesn't look all that good. So if you're like me and you at least need to look the part, Caddy Splash are your people. If you're one of those scratch golfers that's going to go out and dominate, well then you definitely need to take care of your clubs anyway. Caddy Splash, still your people. And right now you can get 15% off of your entire order by using code HEADLINERS at checkout. So hurry up, head on over to caddysplash.com. Whether you take your golf game serious or you take your golf game way too serious, Caddy Splash is exactly what you need to at least look the part every single round. If it hadn't been for a rainy and windy game against Baltimore, Matthew Stafford may have gone into the bye with 4 straight top 8 quarterback performances. And going up against New England this week, he's going to have an opportunity to play well once again. He was the QB4 in their final game before the bye, and I expect him to come out with top 10 potential again, especially since Puka Nacua should be back. Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, we're going to lump them in together for this matchup because they're both MVP candidates. They're both top 5 fantasy quarterbacks. We're starting both of them no matter what. And we know that when Kansas City and Buffalo get together, it's typically a really good game. So we'll go ahead and make sure both of these guys are in our lineup this week, no matter what. Coming out of the bye, Sam Darnold is going to get a nice matchup going up against Washington, currently allowing the 5th most fantasy points per game. And Sam Darnold started to get pretty hot there right before the bye. In his 3 games leading into the bye, he had high performances of QB2 and QB9. He was the QB24 against Houston, a tough defense. We've already talked about him in this video. But this week going up against Washington, I could definitely see him getting back to potential top 12. And for Washington, Jayden Daniels is the factor. If Marcus Mariota plays this week, he's a sit for me. I'm not going to try and roll with him in this matchup. But if Jayden Daniels plays, I will go with him. He's expected back at practice. He's expected to be questionable, but they are hoping he progresses enough this week that he will be able to jump in on Sunday Night Football and play against Seattle. If he does, then yes, he will be in my lineup. I don't care if Kyler Murray plays or if my boy Beef Brisket plays. It doesn't matter. I'm going with either of them as a start this week. Dallas cannot stop opposing defenses. They've given up tons of fantasy points to everybody all season long, and both of these guys would be in a position to give you solid fantasy numbers. Jacoby Brissett did very well against Indianapolis a couple of weeks ago. Kyler Murray, even though he has shown a lot of inconsistency still, he could still make this matchup worth it. Both of these guys are a start, as is basically every quarterback against Dallas. Prior to last week, Dak Prescott had 4 straight top 10 performances, and last week was not good, but he's got plenty of weapons to make it work. This defense and this secondary is solid for Arizona, so I could see maybe an interception. Maybe it does take them a couple of quarters to really get going, but as long as it's a competitive game and they don't outrun Arizona, Dak Prescott should be fine. Headliner Nation, that's going to do it for all of the start and sit videos this week. Hopefully all of the information I was able to provide to you is getting you ready to set your lineups and you're already feeling good about your matchups this week. Make sure you leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe, use your hype points, turn on the bell notifications, everything that you can do to interact with the video, we would greatly appreciate. Stay safe, Headliner Nation, and stay healthy, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.